Hey everyone, it's Brian from the Exact IT Solutions YouTube channel. Welcome to another video where we talk about all things cybersecurity. And today we're going to jump into that Microsoft hack that's all over the news. Well, not the Microsoft hack, the Microsoft vulnerability that was released yesterday, where they disclosed that Chinese hackers were able to take over Exchange servers. And we're going to get into that today a little bit. There's other YouTube's videos out there that'll explain to you exactly what happened. That's not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about some details inside of what Microsoft talked about inside of their release when they announced this that I think is really important, and we got to take a step back and take a look at what they're saying. And I'm going to do that here with you right now. All right, so here we go, folks. This Microsoft released this on March 2nd, 2021, about an Exchange server ZeroDay exploit. So Exchange servers, if you don't know what they are the servers that you connect to if you use Microsoft for your email service. Now, it's very important for me to point out to anyone that doesn't know that this only affects what's known as on-premise Exchange servers. So that means that the Exchange servers and the licensing and the software actually runs within your network, within your company. So if you subscribe to something like Office 365, Hosted Exchange, or Exchange Online, whatever you call it in your company these days, it really depends on when you bought it, what you probably call it. Because Microsoft changes the names over the years. That's basically why there's different names. It's really the same product at the end of the day. It's just cloud-based email versus hosting it yourself on your own server that you own with your own hardware. And there's still a lot of large companies and government organizations that still handle their email this way. A lot of companies in the small and mid and even the larger markets, Fortune 500 companies, have shifted to Exchange Online, but a lot of companies are still hosting their own, and this only affects the folks that are hosting it themselves. So I wanted to make sure that you were clear on that and that we pointed that out, because a lot of CEOs have contacted like our company to say, hey, have you patched this? Have you protected us? When most of our clients are in the cloud with with Exchange Online or Office 365. So we weren't really terribly affected by this. I know a lot of people who were terribly affected by this, and they had a rough last couple days trying to get these servers patched and get everything secure. A lot of these server environments are multiple servers. They're not just one server that they have to patch. It's multiple servers spread out across the world or the country, and it's not an easy task to go through and patch these servers like you might be thinking. So I just wanted to kind of paint that picture. It's really difficult for enterprise level organizations to do things like this at very last second. Usually a patching is planned out, very well thought out, very well planned out and rolled out. And basically Microsoft came out the other day and said, you got to apply this patch now, because we know that these Chinese hackers are actively using this exploit to target systems. Not only that, deploy malware within the systems to gain persistent access. That's what this HalfNite group like to do. So Microsoft goes in here in this article and kind of gives a rundown on what the vulnerability is. It is considered a zero-day exploits. These are the what's known as CVE numbers. If you think of these like think of these like when you see a car recall, when your car gets a recall. That's basically what these are. These are bulletins that are put out that basically let the world know that these vulnerabilities exist, and here's how you remediate or patch them. And these are put out very similarly to how you get your if you have a recall on your car. And the manufacturers put out a bulletin to the NTSB, and the NTSB notifies dealers and auto repair places, and then hopefully that message gets down to you, the driver of the car, so you take your car in to get serviced. And that's what happens here. These bulletins go out. It's expected that your IT team will react to these bulletins that go out and do what's recommended in the remediation so that you're no longer vulnerable to these exploits. So that's kind of how they work. But really, why I wanted to put out this video today wasn't really to educate you on what happened. Again, you can watch other YouTube videos to go find out what happened. This has been, probably beat to death in my opinion at this point, because there's not a lot that the end user can control, and I really want to target this channel to CEOs and business people, and this is more of this is a technical responsibility. This is a CEO can't take care of this unless he's running his own exchange server, which is absolutely insane. But a technical person needs to take care of this. This is more of a technical issue. It did make it into the news because Microsoft typically doesn't release bulletins like this too often, especially in this manner. So it's a big deal because a lot of large organizations and governments are affected, kind of like we saw with the other big SolarWinds hack. It seems like when the government kind of has a vulnerability on their hands, it really hits mainstream media, NBC, ABC, CBS, etc. And then other people are now aware of it that normally aren't aware of all these hacks that I talk about on this channel all the time. So jumping into what I really wanted to kind of dive into here, in this article, if you want to check it out, I will link it in the description below. There's a lot of good technical information on how they're doing how they're doing it, what they're doing, what they're modifying, if they can get access and things like that. That's all covered in this article. And then, they go through on how you can tell if you've been compromised by this activity. You can scan your exchange logs for certain entries that are indicative of what these actors were doing inside of your network and all those things. Windows Defender will now pick up on this stuff, and a lot of endpoint products will now pick up on this now that this has been released. Once their software gets updated and the database gets updated to look for this stuff, it more than likely will get flagged. But at a bigger level, what I wanted to cover, and I'm trying to find it in the article now, and it's right here. Who is Hafnium? So they are Hafnium, and let's talk about the hacking group that's behind this. Again, as I mentioned on this channel before, our two main threat actors that we find are having success with these types of exploits, what are known as advanced persistent threat exploits, are Russia and China. In this case, this is China, and I'm not here to say that the U.S. doesn't do this stuff, because we do, but when it comes to attacking the United States, we really don't attack ourselves. So that's why Russia and China come up. But on the other side of the coin, the Russians look at the United States as like, hey, you're attacking us too. And that's what's going on out there. I just wanted to make sure I gave a 360-degree perspective of what's going on. It's not just China and Russia, and they're so good and they're beating everybody up and they're like the bullies of the cyber world. No, we are doing our fair share as well on this side of the pond. So the United States it primarily targets the United States across a number of sectors, including the infamous infectious disease researchers, law firms, higher education institutions, defense contractors, and policy think tanks and NGOs. So these are all things that I talk about on this channel all the time. And then it goes on to say that Hafnium has previously compromised victims by exploiting vulnerabilities in internet-facing servers and has used legitimate open source frameworks like Covenant for command and control. Once they gained access to a victim's networks, Hafnium typically exfiltrates data to file sharing sites like Mega. And in campaigns unrelated to these vulnerabilities, Microsoft has observed Hafnium interacting with victims' Office 365 tenants, while they're often unsuccessful in compromising customer accounts. This reconnaissance activity helps the adversary identify more details about the target's environment, like they have a server back home somewhere. Like, that's basically what they're saying. Like, even if you have Office 365 or have a tenant in Office 365, a lot of times they can peruse around if you don't have it secured, and they can figure out that you have servers back at your office somewhere or in a data center somewhere that you control, and that gives them kind of a better idea of your infrastructure. That's what they're saying here. But here's the most important part, and what I want to focus this video on today, and that's right here where it says Hafnium operates primarily from leased virtual private servers in the United States. So this is something that I keep seeing over and over when we look at the casualty reports from these attacks, is that these threat actors are increasingly using US-based servers, equipment to carry out these attacks. So what this means is that they are basically going to hosting services. Now think of, and I'm not saying that they're using these specific services, but these are the services that you would typically go to rent something called a VPS, a virtual private server. GoDaddy, Amazon, Microsoft even offers it, Google offers it. There are a ton of smaller hosting providers like Rackspace and other hosting providers that will provide VPS servers to anybody with a credit card. And that's where I think we need to really take a hard look at these hosting services and how they're providing these services, and should we be implementing some sort of background check before you can purchase a server here in the United States. Because if you can't prove who you are and what you do, you can't even get a SSL certificate from a trusted authority. When you see that little lock in your browser, that means the people who own that website went through a process to ensure that they are the company that is actually buying that certificate. And it's debatable how thorough these background checks are, but it's time, I believe, for these hosting companies to implement their own background check on who they rent servers to. Think of this like somebody renting a car. When you go to rent a car, they do a check on you to make sure that you have a license, that you have all the proper things to rent the car, and you're not going to create a problem for them or other people on the road or what have you. But when you rent things from other companies, there's typically some kind of verification process involved to make sure that you're just not some shady character who's renting cars and doing shady stuff. There's very few things in this world that you can rent without having this, without having some sort of check or proof of identity. And that's what we're not seeing in the hosting space. As long as you can provide pretty much a valid address and a valid credit card, which can be easily fabricated, quite frankly, and you can probably get away with, using stolen credit cards for a little while, maybe a month or so before your server would even get shut down. So technically you could use stolen credit cards to spin up VPS servers, and if the credit card charge goes through, then you have a VPS server for 30 days until somebody comes along and disputes that charge or what have you, and that server or account eventually gets shut off. I'm not saying that that's what's going on, but that's one feasible way that these guys could get around identity checks and things like that. If you know the information of the person and then you have a credit card number, you could just use that to rent these servers. It's very, very easy to rent these servers, and it poses a lot of problems for people on the defensive side of the security spectrum, because one of the things you can do is block by country. And if you can block by geolocation, you can stop the attack coming from that particular country. But when you're allowing these attackers to rent servers that are on, within the borders of the United States, and when you do a lookup on an IP address, you're going to say, oh, well, that's a US-based machine, so we're going to allow that to, connect to us. Whereas if it was in another country outside the United States, that connection wouldn't be allowed, and an attacker would have to work a little bit harder to try to get to your system. Not to say that that's like the greatest security methodology out there, but it's one methodology that I know is popular and is used. And when you allow things like this to occur on the internet, that circumvents that security practice, that ability to block based on countries, where if you're not doing business in those countries, you probably just want to block the traffic coming from there. But it's really a thing where we really need to take a hard look at these hosting companies, in my opinion, and put more pressure on them to make sure that they aren't renting VPS servers to hacking groups and things like that. And doing their due diligence to know who they are renting the space to. As a hosting company, you got to ask yourself, do you want to be the hosting company who is labeled as the highway for Chinese hackers to come into the United States? You're the conduit to a foreign actor getting into servers and things like that in the United States. And you make it a lot harder for people to figure out who's accessing their network. And if an attack does go down, you're making it a lot harder for forensic people to figure out who actually did it. So I would start to say that as a community, the tech community, we need to start putting pressure on these hosting companies to end the practice of just renting out VPS servers to whoever comes along with a valid credit card, to start imploring more stringent background checks on the companies who rent these servers from your services, and do your part in this security, because as I talk about all the time, this is a team sport, and we're not going to stop this unless we're all working together to prevent things like this from happening. And you have a tool in place that is allowing hackers to further attacks and be successful in exploiting governments and country and businesses, private businesses in this country. And you need to rethink your business plan if you're okay with that. So that's all I'm going to say today, folks. I know I was on my soapbox there. That's a lot of this is just my opinion. Let me know if you agree with what I'm saying here. Drop some comments down below. Do you have some ideas on how we can prevent things like this from happening? Or maybe you have a completely different perspective on this whole attack and what Microsoft put in this release. So I'd love to hear comments from everyone else to hear what they think. Do you agree with me? Do you think this is something we should really push these hosting companies to do? Or should the government start putting pressure on these hosting companies to do this the right way? I don't know what the right answer is, but I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention because I thought it was just a good, this was probably the most important sentence of the whole release. A lot of this was after action report of here's what we figured out and here's what we know. But this one sentence right here, this is forward looking. This is a warning, in my opinion, to the hosting community that you're allowing this to happen and that we need to tighten this up, because they're using these servers that are based here in the United States. So I hope anyone that didn't really understand what was going on before they watch this video understands a little bit more about how all this stuff works. And if you have any questions about anything I mentioned here, drop them down below in the comments. I'll answer them for you and hopefully make you more cyber aware. So I hope everyone has a great day. And if you were affected by this and you are running internal Exchange servers, you're You're in my thoughts and prayers. I know it's not easy. And I hope everyone got something out of this video, and we look forward to bringing you some more content soon. So if you made it to this point, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and share my video if you would. Share it to your social media family, and hopefully bring more awareness to them as well. Take care, everyone. I'll see you on the other side.